Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Unsecurity Podcast. I'm your host, Oscar Minks, joined as always by the wonderful Brad Nye. Good afternoon, Brad. How are you today?
Well, as I was telling you guys beforehand, I'm super excited. I spent all morning reading the new uh, federal acquisition regulation draft for cybersecurity. So that tells you how my day has been.
Action-packed.
Oh, yeah.
Sounds
Federal
sounds like tons of
legislation.
fun.
Super exciting stuff.
So you're a man of action, I see. Or comedy? Is it a comedy or is it a thriller?
It's dry.
A comedic thriller.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that.
Like Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, it'll be comedic to see people trying to implement this if it passes as is. How's that?
Yeah. Lots of implications there. But before we get into that, too, we were joined by another special guest today, the one and only Matt Dowd, who is our offensive services manager, recently promoted to our offensive services manager. So welcome aboard, Matt. Also, congratulations on your promotion, man. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for the congrats. And yeah, it's good to be here.
Cool. Is this your first time doing the podcast?
It is.
All right.
It is.
We're going to break you in. We ask really tough questions. We're going to surprise you and make you – you're going to be sweating by the time it's over, man.
I'm already sweating. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, Brad. So besides reading action-packed federal regulation documents this morning, what else you been learning about? Anything in the news you wanted to touch on today?
Yeah, no, we've all heard about all the other vulnerabilities. One that just dropped was for Cisco for their Expressway enterprise communication collaboration tool. So internet facing, there are two critical severities that rank at 9.6 that will allow an attacker to do a CSRF attack and impersonate the level of user without authenticating that they attack. So if they attack an admin, they would have admin level to your devices. So keep an eye out for that patch, and as always, threat hunt.
Yeah, it was interesting. So you were talking about this. I'm not familiar with Cisco Expressway. And I really wonder what the user base is for this tool because Matt correctly guessed, what the tool is. And like you mentioned, it's a collaboration tool, but it sounds very similar to Teams with a little bit of Zoom in there. And so I'm curious as to how widely adopted this product is today, how many users may be affected.
Let's have somebody do some OSINT real quick for us.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I'm just going to touch on a little PSA for everybody. So our IR team has been really busy for the last months. I mean, it's really fired up in Q4. They got extremely busy. We've been very busy to kick off Q1 as well. So lots of cases and lots of security incidents right now. Just wanted to give folks a heads up, some of the trends we're seeing. There's a lot of evil proxy attacks right now, which evil proxy is a phishing attack. That's essentially a man-in-the-middle attack, right? So they're sending malicious emails to users and linking to what looks like a valid Microsoft 365 page. It's really a man-in-the-middle page, and attackers are intercepting their login credentials, passing those through, and then intercepting the MFA token as well and passing those through so the attacker actually gets a valid session, bypassing MFA. I can say I'm really happy to see that more and more folks have implemented MFA. That's awesome. But I think as we've highlighted before, there is no silver bullet, and this is a reason why there is no silver bullet. So I want folks to be aware of those type of attacks that are going on. I will say that most of the attacks we've observed at this point, the emails haven't been weaponized or included a stager or anything like that. However, I'm seeing more and more reports out there that the attackers are starting to embed a stager along with the evil proxy attack. So be aware of that. Train your users on how to identify those phishing emails and quickly report them, even if they click the link right and put in their credentials. Tell somebody on your team so you can get that resolved immediately. And then we're also seeing a rise in just VPN-based attacks right now. So a lot of attackers seem to be essentially targeting and looking for VPNs that are still using single-factor authentication and using password attacks to gain access to those VPNs. So another PSA, if you have a VPN right now that you're using for remote access, make sure you've got MFA enabled on that device to protect your users. Matt, any words of wisdom you want to share before we start peppering you with these hot questions?
Just life experience or no? I'm kidding.
Yeah, whatever, man.
No, let's get into the hard hitting questions. I'll save all of my
I,
philosophical.
I think the
rants
first
for
thing
that.
we have to get out of the way, because it's going to come up for anybody who's watching. Yes, it is a requirement for anybody working at FRSecure to have a beard. So we'll get that out of the way right away.
Yeah, Matt, your beard's looking nice, man.
Thank
Coming
you.
in, and I'm also, we have kind of like a unique situation here where I think all three of us actually have red beards too. It
Yeah.
doesn't happen very often where you get
No.
three. You know, I won't say that you guys are full blown ginger, but you've definitely got some ginger in you, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm a day
That's
walker
rare.
for sure.
Yeah.
I told my partner that you got a beard for the job you want, not the job you got. So since all the leadership has beards, just figured it'd be a good move. Get a nice one going.
Well, you are a manager now, so
Success stories.
thanks for. Yeah. What did it take to get to the manager position? Well, I had to grow a beard. All right.
And that took a long time.
Well, cool. Yeah, let's dig in, Matt. Why don't you just give folks a little background about what your role is here? You've already said you're the offensive services manager, team manager today. And what does that mean? What does the offensive services team do? What does your day-to-day look like? And just tell us a little bit about that.
So offensive services is pretty much anything red team. So web application pen testing, internal, external pen testing, device pen testing, really anything that's technology and we can try to break it. We look at all the way down to vulnerability scanning. So not only identifying vulnerabilities and kind of studying that, but also how to exploit them and make sure that we're up to date on our attacks and tooling that we need.
Wait, so I heard two things. I want to make sure I hear this right. Vulnerability scanning and pen testing are different. They're not interchangeable.
It depends on who you ask. I could make a case to go either way, but yeah, I think we'll probably talk about automated pen testing later and how, that's even helping blur the lines even more. But I essentially got here by starting as a consultant at FRSecure, moving over and kind of beefing up the vulnerability scanning program and started to work on pen tests and all that kind of stuff and just kind of rode the ladder as it grew beneath me, So, yeah.
I got to say...
Cool.
Go ahead.
We're super happy to have you on our team, too. And you mentioned one thing that you started as a consultant, then helped us really grow and mature our vulnerability management program. And one thing I love about you is you are a master of process documentation. And one of my favorite things I've ever heard, you said that if you're going too fast to document what you're doing, then you're going too fast. And that is true words of wisdom, man, that I think that really everybody here could benefit from thinking about on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and you don't see it in the technical field. None of us like to write things down. I don't like to write things down, but, you have to. And keep the process static as much as possible, If you aren't repeating process and have a way to repeat process, then everything's going to turn out different and you're never going to get a good measure or a baseline, which is critical for security.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say, one thing I think is cool is I think you started right after me, within a month, if not a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And just you're probably one of the few people that has seen the divergence. Because when we first started, everybody did everything.
Yeah.
And
literally.
And now have that split where I don't know the last time I've done a scan for an assessment, and you've taken that process and just run with it and matured it, and it's really cool to see that growth and how we've been able to, like, as a company, meet different people's skills and find a way to build that up.
Yeah, and it's nice to be a part of a company that does look for those unique skills that everyone has and tries to, adapt your work to to kind of build that growth and allow you to mature in something you like to do. Because, yeah, you seem to do a lot better when it's something you care about and actually understand, and you can help people out. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's dig right in and ask some questions here today. I know we got a few. I want to start. So I think this confuses a lot of people today. We're going to get to automated, but I'm going to start with another question first. I think a lot of people are confused, and probably even some listeners are still really confused about what is a red team engagement versus a pen test engagement. What are the differences and similarities in those engagements?
Sure. So the main similarity is, trying to attack a network, start at one point and end up hopefully, well, I guess it depends which side you're on, but as attackers, we want to have the most credentials that we can get, the highest privilege we can get by the end, and uncover as many gaps as we can. The main difference between internal and red team is the intensity you use to go after it, and kind of the tooling used as well. On internal pen tests, we might start by doing some local enumeration. We'll run Who Am I first thing we get access to. But these days, things like Who Am I and certain enumeration techniques like that are going to get you busted immediately. They're looking for that command specifically. So the red team allows you to do a little more enumeration up front, figure out what the security controls and mechanisms in the environment are, as well as figuring out how to get around those and using more living off the land based attacks, or being able to gather that information without running typical attacks, or just awareness with where you're at in the environment. But all in all, red team is more low and slow. We aren't doing port scans. We aren't doing password spraying, anything like that. We really just start trying to act like the user that we've compromised, looking through their files, looking at the operating system, looking what computers they're connected to, and just communicating inside of our compartment, so to speak.
I love that you said low and slow. One of my favorite things I've always said is like a good attack is like good barbecue, right? Low and slow.
Yep, exactly.
One thing that we do with our pen test is assumed breach, right?
Yep.
And you don't do that with the red team, but maybe explain what does assumed breach mean to somebody that doesn't know that, doesn't recognize that term.
Sure. So assumed breach is, we're assuming that we've breached your environment and gotten a foothold somewhere. So rather than have you spend the money on us fishing forever, or finding a hole in the external perimeter, we just kind of start at the point of compromise. We always coach our clients to give us a system of somebody who would likely be susceptible to that kind of attack, right? So you've always got marketing out on the internet. They're looking at Instagram, Twitter, or X, whatever it's called now, as a part of their job function. So they're always getting large amounts of data from the internet, and are susceptible to download something malicious. HR is another decent target. Call centers, all that kind of stuff. People who, their day-to-day is somewhat monotonous, same thing over and over. And when you get people in a rut like that, they'll just kind of start doing things that they maybe not should, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's interesting too, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but some feedback I've heard from people who maybe don't like that assumed breach approach is, well, that's not fair. We're giving you the access and you didn't have to earn it, right? We think you have to earn that. And I always think that's interesting. It's like, well, I mean, that's fine. I understand your logic, but also we have limited time and resources, right? So you're engaging us. We're going to do a test for a couple weeks, but what they don't understand is that our true adversaries here have unlimited time and unlimited resources. And if, you hired us for an unlimited time and unlimited resources engagement, sooner or later we'd get in too, so it's not the if and when. And so this is, and I can say every incident we work starts with the point of exploitation, right?
Yep,
so
exactly.
we understand that's going to happen. And it's so now we're able to teach people, right? Like these are the potential points of escalation, the potential damage to your environment when that inevitable breach does occur.
Exactly. And usually when we have those discussions where it's not fair that, we want you to run a Cobalt Strike beacon on a workstation, it's like, well, can you send us a box to plug into the network? And it's like, well, is that a realistic breach? Like, is your facility locked down? Do you have, restrictions on the firewall that wouldn't allow my MAC address to be allowed to route traffic? And then ultimately, it's all about what you want at the end of the day. But like you said, a persistent threat will have success in some regard.
Well, I mean, and like you said, it's just saving them time because, it's going to happen. We're just assuming that it's already happened. So, get over it. That's my take.
Exactly. And, I mean, at the end of the day, you hired us because we're working together on your security program. If I wanted a pen test, my first vector would be IT. Unlikely your IT is going to get compromised, but, like, the thing that is uncovered at some point in almost every pen test is, some IT administrator has given themselves a key to the kingdom and didn't tell anybody else. It's not a part of audits that happen. And they can see everything. They can see the day-to-day. They usually have admin to a few systems. And they might not need admin to all the systems that they've been provided admin to. So, I'd want to see all the gaps, regardless of, how bad it would make me look. And I think that's ultimately the hang up is people want a clean report. I'd love to give you a blank report every time and be like, yeah, you're doing great. But at the end of the day, if we uncover the gaps, we can fix them, we can plug them in. And it's nobody's fault that there were gaps there to begin with. It's just working together to make sure they're actually filled.
Yeah. Or like the help desk tech that had a poor server on the production network plugged in under their desk. Which, yeah, that's fun.
Set up all sorts of Lambda functions to Bitcoin mine and all fun stuff like that.
We've got a case we've worked where I don't know the number, but someone from the IT team installed over 10 crypto miners in multiple data centers. But going back to what you're talking about, so I think that people sometimes get very defensive when they're in the role, right? IT feels like this is like, hey, they're going to come in and show everybody I'm doing a bad job or whatever. Like that's not our goal, right? Our goal is exactly like you said. Let's identify those risks in your environment. Let's help you correct that because you are your tech, your IT, you're not a security person. And those are two very different roles. And so let's help bridge that gap. Use this as an educational opportunity and opportunity for growth, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
What are some common things that you see on a regular basis as far as, like misconfiguration or poor password, not policies, but password selection, right?
Sure.
What are things that you kind of see as in high frequency on those internal network tests?
One of the things that was new, and by new, I think it was 2020 that it was rolled out, but certificate attacks. So you set up a PKI. There's not necessarily a flaw, but a lot of the certificates that you deploy for certain services, if it's misconfigured to allow a low privileged user to modify the certificate template, you can use that template to specify a subject alternative name, which could be anybody within the domain. and enroll yourself in that certificate for authentication. So there's pen tests where, we do our enumeration for the first couple hours. Then we're like, hey, let's check certificates. And the attack takes about 40 seconds to complete. And if it's compromised, the certificate persists beyond password changes. So if I set up a authentication certificate that works for 6 years and you don't realize that I'm using a certificate for authentication and you don't go in and restrict that certificate or remove it, I have authentication as that user as long as they are a user. So it's a 0 to hero really, really quick. And it's just really easy, especially in small shops where it's, an IT guy just trying to get the thing working. So somebody can have their server or their secure communication, and it's just the level of understanding isn't there to mitigate that. So that's been a pretty common one even still. But then it usually comes down to bad file permissions. So, as a low privileged user, if I'm an executive assistant, I shouldn't need to see your web config files for your file servers and pull data connection strings out of those and connect up to SQL servers and certain things like that. So those are probably the most common things. Password attacks are getting a little less successful, I'd say, with the advent of people going to 12 to 14 character minimum passwords and that kind of thing. The other thing that's been pretty cool is people using word lists to restrict, do that check within Microsoft where it's like, okay, so you've met the conditions of the 14 character minimum. Now does your password exist on the Have I Been Pwned database? And looking at things like that. Because when they first started rolling out 14 character passwords, it went from password 123 to password 123. And it's like, that's still in compliance, but we just had to double up password now. So
yeah,
it's really interesting.
Complexity doesn't equal security, right?
Exactly. So, and people are really innovative with their laziness. Like, I remember the first time I heard about the minimum, or the minimum amount of time between password changes. Like, why would you ever set that to anything but from 0? And then it's like, well, you got the guy who changed his password 15 times in the morning back to what it was the first time, and still in compliance. And it's like the understanding needed to make that happen is cool in and of itself for a low privileged non-technical user, but it's like, yeah, you've got your users circumventing security policies that
which it's almost more effort to do that than just change your password once and just remember I changed my password.
Yep.
There is a tool, a blue team tool that our blue team's created, and I don't know if they're going to be mad at me for sharing this, but it's called LBI, which stands for Laziness Breeds Innovation. And I think that's a perfect example of that.
Yep. Yeah, it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
I love to learn those thought processes.
So another question I kind of want to talk about is like our market, and this is something I think about where it's becoming more and more competitive, right? So there are more pen testing firms out there, good or bad. And we see a lot of people out there today that are doing what I would call a bullshit pen test. And I think we do hold to a very high quality standard for our methodology and how we approach a pen test. And that's something we're very adamant we're never going to get in that game. And then that's came along with the bullshit pen testing firms. Now we have a whole gang of folks advertising automated pen testing. Just want to put you on the spot and say, what is an automated pen test? Kind of how does that differentiate from a vulnerability scan? And how does it differentiate from what we're doing, which is manual penetration testing?
I mean, my definition of automated pen test would be something along the lines of Pentera, which is a company that came up multiple times when kind of looking at automated pen tests.
Does Don Bagdero work there? Wait, God rest his soul. I'm joking.
That would be really cool.
Yeah.
I would be all in. I would be all in if Dimebag was over there. But it's like the agent. It's an agent-based kind of vulnerability scanner type of thing, where you put agents on all your endpoints. They keep it up to date with CVEs and all sorts of attack vectors like that. So it covers you on that base. But then they also use the kind of MITRE attack framework to categorize, APTs and PPTs and things like that. You can click a button and run the attack, which is cool. Metasploit kind of started out like that as well. Rapid7's framework, same kind of thing. We can identify the vulnerability and you can click this button if you want to try to exploit it. So those are the kinds of things that I would consider automated pen testing, where it's like, not only did we identify it, but we validated it and went through the attack chain to actually prove it out. Whereas the bullshit would be, we ran a vulnerability scan. It says there's a lot of bad stuff here. We didn't validate any of that. But yep, go work on that. And at some point, they'll even throw some manual validation in there as well to be like, hey, we went and, Nessus identified this vulnerability based off of the operating system version, where it's like, okay, but depending on mitigating controls or what they've got installed on that server, the attack may not work, or something to that effect. So the manual validation is really the component of it that I would say is required to be an actual pen test. But at the same time, if you're not skilled as a pen tester, you don't know what to look for, and you're at the mercy of the tool that you're using to identify vulnerabilities, you're going to miss all sorts of things that a normal attacker would look for within the first few minutes. Specifically, file share permissions, local administrator, those show up on vulnerability scans, but they're in the informationals, and everyone likes to look at the pretty colors first and not actually see what's going on or how it was identified. And as working with the vulnerability scanning team, the thing that comes up every single day is we found a false positive. Whether or not it actually is a false positive is up for debate, but I probably send Tenable one case a week to be like, hey, this wasn't identified properly. There's an example is Server 2019 has a end of life that was supposed to happen in January this year. And Nessus updated the plugin to look at the extended support. So Microsoft extended support for 2019 through 2028 now, I think. And we're still getting vulnerabilities back on 2019 servers saying that they're unsupported, even though Tenable has a note saying, we know that the end of life has been extended, and we actually updated the plugin to differentiate between Windows 10 and Server 2019, but it's not. So, I've opened a case to make sure that it's identifying itself properly. And then you're also at the mercy of the tool to have your systems online when the scan runs, or ensure that all your systems are accounted for. We know that asset management is one of the most difficult things in the world to get under control, especially with, shadow IT or just even regular IT, there's always something you're missing.
Mm-hmm.
So having the pen tester go in, doing the port scans, looking for systems in Active Directory, kind of just digging down layer by layer to see where the gaps are, because there will likely be a server that was missed.
Well, and real quick, one thing that listeners should be aware of is there are certain regulatory requirements that state automated pen testing does not satisfy the requirement for an annual pen test. I was trying to think of, I could not remember which one it is off the top of my head, but we'll have to get that out there. But know your regulatory and contractual requirements when you're choosing this.
Yeah, and I think Dowd highlighted that there is some value in some automated pen testing. I get that. But for me, the biggest takeaway and differentiator for me is they're very vulnerability driven, right? But we understand the true attack path or attack methodology. Risk doesn't always equal vulnerability, right? Risk can be many things besides vulnerability. And so when you have the automated approach or the scan then verify approach, you're limiting that test to a very small subset of factors that are at play in a very complex environment. And so that's why I feel it's not a true pen test. It always requires that human element, that human intervention, and someone too that has the foundational knowledge and understanding of these complex environments to be able to understand misconfigurations or identify incorrect share permissions, certificate abuse, things like that. There's a human element that always has to be in play if we really want to simulate what our adversaries are doing today. Our adversaries aren't using Pentera. I'll say that.
Right.
Maybe they should think about it. That might be a value add for them.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. I appreciate you being on. I think we're about out of time here today. Thanks again, Matt, for hopping on. Before we go, we always like to give a shout out to somebody you appreciate, somebody you just want to give a shout out to for whatever reason. Maybe you just want to give a shout out to Dimebag Daryl. That's cool. So I'm going to start with you, Dowd. You got a shout out for us today?
The shout out to Dimebag is always implied, but I think I'm going to brown nose a little and say Eric Hansen, my dear leader and boss. He's always got some perspective for me that I didn't consider, and I do like to consider a lot of different perspectives and argue with myself a lot and make sure that I've got sound logic there. So, for being kind of a rock for me to be like, hey, what did I miss here? And he always finds something. I can never do anything good enough to please Dad, but it's fine.
Heck yeah, that's a great shout out, man. Eric's on top of that, always been the rock. Just a pretty good dude. We can say that too.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Brad, how about you?
I think I'm going to give a shout out, and first off to our whole BBRM team. We've had a bunch of new people that have stepped in and started taking it on, but I think I'll give Brian and Shane and Dave a shout out for kind of taking a lot of the burden off of me to train everyone up. They've really stepped up and helped train all our new members that are taking it on. So shout out to them.
Yeah, love it. I'm going to give a shout out to our CRO, Drew Bokey. He's, working his tail off right now. I know he's at home playing daddy daycare too and helping family with some medical issues. And the guy's, busy from 5 a.m. to midnight right now. And every time I talk to him, he's still got a smile on his face and he's very positive, and really appreciate that. So kudos to you, Drew, and doing a great job, man. All right. Well, thanks guys for tuning in. Hope everybody has a fantastic week, and we'll see you back here in a couple weeks. Thanks guys.
Thanks.
Bye.